Welcome to the New England Football Show presented by Mortgage Right. I'm your host, John Serenitas, and as always, I'm joined by my partner, Kevin Stone. And tonight we have the good fortune to be joined by CBS Sports' Tyler Sullivan. Tyler, how's it going, man?
What's going on? Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for taking the time, brother. We greatly appreciate it. Of course, we're going to be talking Patriots with Tyler here in the next 35 minutes. But before we do that, I do want to remind you that if you are in the market to sell your current home or purchase your first home, give our good friend Herb Devine a call at 781-254-2846, or you could shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. With over 27 years of experience, Herb Devine is the expert when it comes to helping you getting into the right program to purchasing your next home. He can walk you through the process, and he has seen it all, ladies and gentlemen, especially in the Massachusetts and New England market. So if you need that expertise, you need that experience, I can't say enough good things about Herb Devine. As someone who's in the real estate business, I know how hard it is to find good loan officers who have the connections you need with lenders and can get you into the right program. Give Herb a call again at 781-254-2846 or shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. He and his team are available anytime, including nights and weekends. All right, gentlemen, you guys have been down at Gillette Stadium for the start of training camp. Of course, it all kicked off last Wednesday, the 24th, with the first practice. Today was the first padded practice. So let's just jump right into this. Kind of want to get a summation of what you guys have seen through 5 practices. We've been hearing a lot coming out of there in regards to Drake May, the performance of the offense, contract issues. Obviously, there was some drama today with Matthew Judon. We're going to get to that in a sec. But I just want to get your overall thoughts on the first 5 practices and where do you think the Patriots are at this point in training camp?
Yeah, to me, Kev, we've talked about this a couple of times just watching it. There is kind of a lack of urgency is a bad word because it's the summertime, right? Like we're not, in the middle of the season. We're not even, at the tail end of training camp, the training camp or the preseason. But it just feels like there's a lack of pace. The Patriots coaches, players, they've talked a lot about the excitement, the looseness, the change of going from Bill Belichick to Gerard Mayo. The music's playing throughout. And yes, that's a good thing. It maybe keeps the players loose, but there really hasn't been a lot of pace. So, one thing that Kev, we were talking about this earlier today, like no 2-minute, no red zone, not a lot of situational football that we've been seeing. That is a huge difference than in training camps past with Bill Belichick. So to me, that's kind of the biggest thing, the lack of overall pace that we've seen to this training camp so far.
Yeah, 100%. You mentioned it. We haven't seen red zone yet. I thought for sure we would see that today in the first day of pads. Haven't seen that. There's a lot of standing around. I think I've said that to you at least once a day, if not more. Like, 2-3 minutes left in a period, the offense is just sort of standing, milling around and, shooting the shit or whatever. And yes, we've talked about this as well. It's hot out. You need a little bit of a break, whatever it might be. But it's 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 minutes at a time where nothing's happening. So it's very, and we expected it to be different, obviously, than it was under Bill. But it's just, you're right, man. There's just there's no sense of urgency. And now, for our benefit, it's been mostly team periods. There's been very, very few indie periods, but when there is, it's usually about 40 minutes to start practice. John, you remember last year, how long were those indie periods? 10 minutes maybe, tops, and then they'd go to something else. That's not the case. When they're in drills, they're in them for a long time, and then it's team. It's mostly team though. So it's a weird feeling. It's the only way I can explain it. It's weird. It's been a little bit productive, but I don't know, man. It's a weird start to this camp.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that each coach is going to put their own fingerprints on it in regards to practice structure and what they want to emphasize and what they want to do. And clearly Mayo is doing that. I know that red zone was a staple of a Belichick practice early in training camp. I never understood that. I don't know how you can jump right into red zone when you haven't built up to it. I'm not here to question what Belichick did. He's arguably the greatest coach of all time. It worked. But from a coaching standpoint, in almost 30 years of coaching, I would look at that and say, I'm not, I get working situations and situational football, but to be jumping in a red zone the first couple of days, it made no sense to me because I've been an offensive coordinator for a long time. You build up to that. And that's how I've always looked at it. Now, every level's different, obviously. So, again, I'm not questioning why he did it. I just thought it was interesting.
Well, one question I have on that just quickly is, it's kind of going off of what we were talking about, right? There does feel to be a lack of pace, a lack of energy. I do wonder if we did get into a little bit of those competitive periods in terms of make or break red zone. Is that something that gets the competitive juices flowing?
It could. It could, absolutely. But I think that the pace could also be a byproduct of them installing a new offense and putting in some different things on defense. Again, I haven't been there to see it. I'll be there tomorrow. But, again, I think a lot gets made of that stuff this time of year. And I think part of it is that I think that the media does feel the need to report on everything that's going on, which they should. It's their job. But I also think that we do have a tendency to read too much into that stuff. I'm going to read more into that stuff next week when we get into a preparation week, and it's the preseason, so you don't prepare a lot. I get it. But I do think that there will be more of a sense of urgency the rest of this week, especially now that the pads are on. And I'm curious to see what they look like in those practices next Monday and Tuesday, because by that point, we'll be almost 10 practices in. We'll have a pretty good idea of how this football team is going to practice and prepare. We'll see. I think at the end of the day, it's early in Mayo's first year. So I do think that we need to pump the brakes on overanalyzing. And I'm not saying that you guys are doing that, but from what I've been gathering and seeing out there in terms of what people are saying, I think there's a lot of onus placed on the pace and the players' body language and the vibe. It seems like the players are saying all the right things, right? I mean, Austin Hooper comes out today, praises Mayo's leadership style. He's been referred to as a player's coach. That, however, could be an issue. We're going to come back to that in a second. But before we do that, Ken Matthias joins the show. Thanks for checking in, Ken. Interesting comments today by Mayo. Him and Bill haven't spoken much since he got hired as a head coach. What could it be between Bill and Mayo? Well, I think it's a combination of things. I think Bill has moved on. I think that he wants to give Mayo the space he needs to run his own program. And I think from Mayo's standpoint, that's just it. He wants to run his own program. He wants to put his own fingerprints on this thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're Bill, and from everything we heard, he was already taking his job from under his nose a year ago or 2 years ago. Why is Bill going to reach out to him? So I wasn't surprised by that. And John, to your point, look, they have a job. Mayo has a job to do. He's not going to go seek out Bill and ask for advice at this point. So I'm not too worried about that. I'm sure they'll reconcile, and I'm sure they'll have a come to Jesus and be fine eventually down the road.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more. It's awkward, right? I mean, it just frankly is awkward. I mean, we were talking back in the spring whether or not he would even show up for Brady night. Obviously, did. It was a great moment, but it is still awkward. This dude coached for over 2 decades in New England and not left, but he left in a very unceremonious way. 4-13, agreed to mutually part ways, which is a nice way of saying he got fired. And not only did he get fired, but the dude that's taking his job, as you were saying, Kevin, was already under contract to take that job while he was already the head coach. That's certainly something that I would just assume everybody would hate. Nobody would want to know that the dude that's going to take your job is your de facto defensive coordinator sitting there waiting for you to move on, screw up, what have you. So it's just awkward. But overall, if we're talking about why haven't they talked in terms of coaching, well, Jerod Mayo has been a player under Bill Belichick, and he's been a coach under Bill Belichick for his entire NFL life. He knows everything that he would want to know from Bill Belichick. He's got to incorporate Jerod Mayo, the head coach, into this New England Patriots team right now. If he's just picking the brain of Bill Belichick this whole time, then why'd you get rid of the guy in the first place?
Yeah, no, and I think that's a great point. I think at the end of the day, he's got to put his own stamp on it. And these questions about Belichick, and I think it was the interview with Kay Adams that Ken is referring to, it needs to stop. We need to stop talking about Belichick. He's gone. He's no longer here. Yeah, we'll speculate after this season where he could potentially end up depending on what jobs open up. But I think at the end of the day, this has to be Gerard Mayo's show. He has to do it his way. And by the way, for what it's worth, I don't think he's doing it that much his way to begin with. But Belichick's imprint is still on this organization. They're still doing a lot of the things that Belichick did. And oh, by the way, they're also re-signing a lot of the players that Belichick picked to long-term deals. So I'm not sure that they've really separated themselves as much as they would like to believe from Bill Belichick as they think. I think at the end of the day, he needs to start doing that, though. So I think whenever he gets asked questions about Belichick, I think he needs to start to distance himself. This needs to be his program. If it's not his program and we're still talking about Belichick, especially during the course of the season, that's bad news for Mayo. I think he really needs to separate himself and make this his own thing. AJ Grant checks in. Focus on red zone on day one because it will stress how important the red zone is. Yeah, I get that, and I understand that. I just think to me, I've always felt you build up to that. You build up all these other situations in different parts of the field to that. But I also get what AJ is saying. I think it stresses the importance of it and having success in that part of the field because you need to finish drives. As I used to tell my players, gentlemen, drives are like vegetables. You got to finish them. So I think at the end of the day, Belichick obviously, to AJ's point, wanted to come out of the gate stressing that part of the game. Obviously, there's been a lot of drama in camp. The vibe's been different in regards to Mayo and the way he's dealing with the players. For the most part, the player response, it seems, has been pretty positive in regards to Mayo as a head coach and how he's handling the players. The one thing that I think is interesting, and I think we all can universally agree on this, is the players are definitely more vocal now, especially in regards to their contract situation. We've seen it the last few weeks with Davin Godshaw, with Judon, of course, which you're going to get into his antics today. But even though Mayo is more of a player's coach and the vibe is different, it's different in the sense that the players feel that they can vocalize more about their situation and how they feel, but that could be a slippery slope.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and and maybe not in the way that you think either. To me, it's so hard because you're talking about you got to stop bringing up Bill Belichick, and I totally get that. That makes a ton of sense. But in this situation, I do think that we kind of need to examine it a little bit more with the Bill Belichick kind of scope to it. He was the head coach, but he was also the GM, the head of player personnel. So whenever anybody would talk about their contract or kind of give a little side eye, they're not giving a side eye to the head coach, Bill Belichick. They're giving a side eye to the GM, Bill Belichick. And so I almost do wonder, if Gerard Mayo allowing his players to be a little bit more vocal. Matt Judon was very candid last week. Devon Godshaw spoke about his contract. Jabril Peppers, before he signed his extension, talked about how he'd like to get an extension. I almost wonder, does that impact the relationship between Mayo and Elliott Wolf to a certain degree? To be like, hey,
I think that's a great question.
Can you
Tyler,
reel in the players a little bit for me? I know you're trying to create a different type of atmosphere, but you're putting me on the hot seat here. We're talking about two guys now running the organization in tandem, as opposed to previously when it was one fist kind of running the whole show. So that's a layer that I think is worth exploring a little bit more when we talk about this.
Yeah, and Tyler, to that point, who else was on that hill today? Robin Glazier was out there too. We've seen her a ton at camp already the first 4-5 days. So there's multiple voices, and this sort of gets into the Judon thing. When he originally left practice today and came back and started talking to them. Well, now where's the messaging? Like, what did and didn't Mayo know? Does he know, what's going on? Did he know Judon was going to even be out there today? So there's a lack of, I think, communication already that needs to be reined in. And just one other point about Mayo. The other day, I think it was Friday, he said something striking when he was asked about Peppers to confirm the Peppers deal. He sort of forgot that he was head coach for a minute. He said, oh, yeah, I can confirm that. So I think he's still getting adjusted to the off the field stuff, maybe even more so than the on the field stuff.
Yeah, and again, and I do want to get into the Judon thing in a second. Let's not forget, last year Judon pulled this same stunt, and he ended up getting a pay raise. Now, he didn't practice, and to Belichick's credit, he didn't on the field. They stayed away from each other. He didn't really interact with him. He was on the lower field at times, it's interesting to see how it played out this time. And I think one of the things that is so hard about coaching in the NFL is now you're dealing with men. You're not dealing with high school kids anymore. You're not dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds who, to a certain degree, you have a level of control over them with the scholarship. Of course, the transfer portal and NIL has changed the coach-player relationship at the collegiate level. Now, the players have a lot more power than they used to, but there's still a certain level of control there on the part of the coach. In the NFL, you're dealing with grown men, and they don't care what you think of their value or what other teams might think of their value. Them and their agents have a set value in terms of what they bring to the table and what they do. And so Judon, who is scheduled to make $7.5 million this year, is looking at it and saying to himself, well, I'm worth more than that. Yeah, I missed the majority of last season with a shoulder injury, but I'm worth more than that. And I think at the end of the day, that's the way he's looking at it. He's 100% healthy. He did, the arm issue is no longer there. He's ready to go, and he thinks that when he's healthy, he's one of the premier pass rushers in the league, and he has been. But this idea, and again, this is my issue with today's athlete in general, enough with this ripping up the contracts bullshit and starting over. It just can't work that way. And I think, unfortunately, the NBA is a big reason why we're seeing this in other sports now, because it seems like every 2 years, NBA players' contracts are up and they're getting pay raises. But I think in the case of Judon, look, for all the good things that he does for your organization on the field, in the locker room, he's kind of become the face of the franchise, if you will, from a player standpoint. There's this side of him where he could be wildly immature. He's not afraid to voice his opinion. He's not afraid to tell it like it is, which is a great quality. I appreciate it. But there's a time and a place, which brings me to what happened today. Obviously, you guys are reporting, and you mentioned it, and other people have been reporting throughout the day that he came out. I know that at one point he had a conversation with Mayo. Now, was he sent off the field? Was he kicked out of practice?
It's tough for us to, Kevin, I think you could agree. It's tough for us to definitively say that. Like, great, for instance, Josh Uche was kicked out of practice today for fighting. It was very clear cut, like he was kicked out of practice. It looked like, from clips that you could see better on social media with cameras, it looked like they had a conversation, Gerard Mayo and Matt Judon, little animated, all we can do is look at hands and arms waving around like they're out front of a used car salesman. And, then he left. And then at some point in the practice, he came back. And so I don't know if that was a defiance by Matt Judon because he was told to leave, or maybe it was, hey, I got to go cool off. I'm going to go for a walk like that. It's tough for us to definitively say, right, Kev?
Yeah. So look, what stood out to me, and you and I were side by side when this all happened, when he originally came out and guys are coming up the stairs in pads and he's in a hoodie, usually he'll have his pads or his helmet with him. He didn't have anything. I looked at you and I think it was Mike Kadlick. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. He went and did his normal thing, playing catch with the fans and all of that. But then that's when the quote unquote temper tantrum started. And John, if you can visualize this, where the blue guys defense lines up for stretching on that left sideline, where all the pads and stuff are over there, he's just sitting there like a child, basically in timeout. And he did that. He moped around a little bit during stretching and stuff. Also, Jabril Peppers happened to get hurt during this point as well. So a very strange morning. But he sort of moped around. He went and sat by the position group while they were going through Indy. And then that's when that conversation happened. And we presume he was kicked off the field. For me, the problem here is last week when he went on for that, 10 minutes, Tyler, and he said he wasn't going to do this kind of crap. He said, I'm under contract. I'm going to play it. I'm not going to pull this kind of stuff. I'm going to basically, paraphrasing, I'm going to do what I need to do. He did not do that today. In fact, it was the complete opposite. And I wrote this earlier. This is now a real test for Gerard Mayo very early on. You have defensive guys getting hurt. Christian Barmore may be out for the year. You still haven't seen Pop Douglas or Kendrick Bourne on the field yet. You don't know what this offensive line is. 5 days in, he has his hands full already. So this just sort of, I guess, made everything worse today before really we've seen anything yet.
Well, just even go back to last week, Kevin. He said that, like you said, he wasn't going to really do this. If I think someone asked him point blank, like, if you go into the season on your current deal, are you going to play? And he said yes, in no uncertain terms. He goes, I put my name on that contract, I'm going to play. So we thought, or at least you assume, you take the player at his word. That's the situation that it's going to be. And he was also said in that press conference as well that the Patriots had not explicitly told him that either. So I wonder if he was explicitly told that between now and then by some people, on top of possibly seeing Drew Rosenhaus today, the agent for Devon Godchaux, that deal possibly on the horizon, if not done. He was speaking with Robin Glazier. He was speaking with Matt Groh, from what I saw, a long conversation with Godchaux, Rosenhaus, and Gerard Mayo after practice right in front of the stairs. So if we're all seeing that, Matt Judon is also seeing that. And does that create a whirlwind? And you have to also think about this as well. He has talked to every important person in the Patriots organization, Matthew Judon, on the field in front of all of us. We're talking about Gerard Mayo today. We're talking about Elliott Wolf and Matt Groh. But go back to last week after he had that press conference, the next practice, he had an extended conversation with Robert Kraft as well, who was on the field. So he is getting his point across, and I don't think it's working. And I think that's why what we saw today, which is what I wrote on CBSSports.com, he was outright sulking on the practice field. He was on the pads. He was sitting on a trash can sulking and putting on a performance. And like you said, Kev, this is an interesting situation for Gerard Mayo and Elliott Wolf.
Yeah, and look, you have your hands full as it is this time of year with trying to figure out, your starters, your depth chart, trying to evaluate guys, trying to see who is rising, who's falling, who are some early cut candidates. That there's a lot going on for a coaching staff the first week or two in training camp as they prepare to play that first preseason game. And then you add all this to it. But I will say this, I think this is partly their doing, because you have to figure when you're paying, and I know that this has been asked all offseason, why are you committing so much to guys coming off a 4-13 season? And fellas, I got to tell you, I think that's a valid question. I don't necessarily disagree with what they've been doing in re-signing a lot of their own guys to longer term deals. I think they look at it as it's their second contract. We might as well get 2 contracts out of them. We are confident in what they are as players. They fit what we want to do philosophically. But if you're a guy like Judon in your early 30s, you see that, you say to yourself, well, wait a minute. I've been more important to this football team than 5 guys that they've paid this offseason. Why aren't they willing to talk to me about an extension? He has in the past said he wants to be here, right? But he's probably looking at it and saying, why aren't they having this conversation with me? Why aren't they talking to me about wanting to be here long term? Well, I think for a couple of reasons. One, he's on the wrong side of 30. 2, he's coming off a significant injury. And 3, when you think about the role of the pass rusher in today's NFL and how they're getting paid, because the mentality is, and you're seeing this around the league. Look at Hassan Reddick is sitting out with the Jets. He's getting fined $15,000 a day. I think when you look at the view around the league of the pass rusher, I think it's really changed. And the elite guys are still going to get paid. And I'm not saying Judon's not elite, but the perception is he's probably not in the same class as a Nick Bosa, as a Bradley Chubb. Those guys have gotten paid. He got his one payday. Even if it's not here, even if it were to be somewhere else, I don't see him getting this massive payday that he's expecting. At best, he gets a 3-year deal. At best, he gets $12.5 million a year. He's probably looking at $36 million and change. No team's going to break the bank for him beyond that. And even that type of contract might be a lot to ask for him, given his age and the injuries coming off of.
And this goes back to what you said a little bit earlier, too, about the situation with his contract. They addressed it last year by pulling money from this year, 2024, into 2023, which is kind of a big nugget that we should highlight, because clearly that's part of the conversation. He agreed to that. That is not, hey, we're giving you a raise. It's here, we're forwarding you money that you're already going to get paid anyways, but you're going to make less on the back end. That is normal part of conversations. And I know that, again, it's not Bill Belichick pulling the strings anymore, but a lot of those same people are in that building. So you kind of knew this was on the horizon just as much as Matt Judon knew what he signed up for. The front office that's in place also knew what was in front of them and the possibility of this personality coming out in a negative way. And so I just wonder how this wasn't handled one way or another, whether he's part of the group that gets the extension or gets a bump or whatever you want to call it, or he is someone that, to coin the Belichick term, they get rid of a year too early as opposed to a year too late. And that's in the form of a trade this offseason. I just don't understand why that wasn't addressed this offseason when it was so clear that this could become an issue, especially knowing that you're going to be paying a lot of his teammates on that side of the ball as well.
So real quick, how do you see this playing out? How do you both of you see this playing out with Judon?
Go ahead, Kev.
So I was just going to back that up a little bit. And Tyler, you can back me up on this today. If nothing else, Judon kind of won the day today because they do not have a pass rush right now. They might need to pay him, which, and John, you know this, I've been saying this for a few weeks. I was on team trade Judon. Just, I thought this would be a problem. I didn't think it'd be this big of a problem. I thought he'd handle it a little bit better. I thought he'd handle it the way he did last week, and then that would kind of be the end of it until there was a resolution. But they might have to pay him right now because of that Barmore injury. I think that it's a significant kind of change to the whole puzzle. At this point, look, I still trade him. I don't think Mayo can afford to have this sort of issue lingering. But I also, after watching today, I'm not sure how they can get away with not paying him. So it's a wishy-washy answer, but I'm on the fence. I don't know how this is going to end. I ultimately think you need him, though, maybe even more so than I thought.
So I think you're totally right. You know, I totally see where you're coming from, but I think that we need to have a very honest conversation of where this 2024 New England Patriots are going to go. Do you think that this team is going to the Super Bowl? You think this team's going to the playoffs? Like, if they're the Houston Texans and, you know, Drake May, CJ Stroud, then, you know, more power to you. Give Judon the money and let's go on a little run and have fun. I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is a multi-year rebuild under Gerard Mayo. And for that reason, I kind of feel like, you know, coming off of today in particular, I know that the Barmore thing is, you know, a detriment to the football operation this season. We don't know when he's going to come back, if he comes back this season at all. Monumental loss. Again, this dude just signed a contract that, you know, he's richer than anybody but Tom Brady in Patriots history. It's bananas. You know, the unluckiness for the Patriots and obviously the player as well. But if you're Gerard Mayo, I almost feel, and if you're Elliot Wolf now too, I after today, I almost feel like you have to get rid of him. I almost feel like he has to be gone in some way, shape, or form. Because if all of a sudden, and you know, if it's the Barmore reason, I get it from a football standpoint, but from a culture building standpoint, this is year one of Gerard Mayo. You're building a culture that you hope lasts as long as Belichick's 20 years. Is it really good principle to set the precedent in year one that you can have a player to go out and do what he did? And I'll use my word. He was sulking on the field, complaining to everybody down the line in terms of ownership to front office men. You're going to reward that with a contract. You're going to give him a little bump. So what happens with the next player? You know, let's say Jalen Polk is, you know, the next star wide receiver to get paid, God willing. Is he going to do that? Is that how you're going to operate? Because he saw Matt Judon do it during his rookie season. It worked out for him. I think that this is a slippery slope if they decide to pay him. And I think that actually it would send a great message if they got rid of him after that. It would be a tone-setting move that we haven't really seen Gerard Mayo make yet.
No, I think you both bring up a great point. And I think if you had asked me 2 weeks ago, I probably would have told you I don't think that they should trade him. I think they should work towards an extension with him. But based on what happened today, to your point, Tyler, if you're going to set the tone and you're going to make this your program, if you're Gerard Mayo, you can't have this crap. You can't. And look, you're not going anywhere this season. I've said this all along, and Patriot fans are not going to want to hear this because they're assuming that people like me are saying punt on the season. But in essence, yes, punt on the season. Develop Drake May the right way. Run this thing the right way. You're a developmental program right now. You're not going to do what Houston did last year. you're not going to be a Super Bowl contender. So let's do this the right way. It's not to say that it couldn't happen. Could Gerard Mayo be D'Amico Ryans? Could Drake May, if he plays early, end up being C.J. Stroud? Sure, anything's possible. But the odds of that repeating itself in this season around the league are pretty slim. So as far as I'm concerned, if you're trying to establish a culture and you're trying to run the program the way you want, your way, you can't have that. Now, Mayo may not feel that way. Mayo may like Judon and say, you know what? I don't appreciate what you did. I don't like the antics. Don't do it again, or else we're going to move on. Let's sit down and try to figure out your contract. Mayo and Wolf may very well approach it that way. But, yeah, from the outside looking in, based on what happened today and the antics, I've come around to Stone's logic from a few weeks ago where I don't think you have a choice at this point because it's not going to get better with him. If you decide he's not a part of your future and you're moving on after this season, he's going to be a problem all year. And if you don't trade him now, you're probably going to have to do it at the deadline. Either way, I don't think they have a choice here. And Tyler, I think you bring up a fantastic point. What message does that send to the young players? In 2 years from now, if Jalen Polk is coming off of a combined 2,400, yard seasons and he's scored, 10, 12 touchdowns in his career, he's going to want to get paid. He's going to threaten to sit out. He's not going to show up for OTAs and minicamp. Now you're going to have the same situation, and you can't afford to do that. So I think it not only sends a message to those young players, but it also sends a message to the guys that they re-signed that, hey, we put our faith in you. We see you being a part of our future. Don't be that. Don't be that guy. And so I think that the message is bigger than just the young players. I think you could really obviously send a message to your entire team if you decide to move on from him. I do want to jump on the Barmore conversation real quick. I know you guys have both mentioned him at various points. First of all, any updates on his situation?
I don't believe so.
No,
I think Mayo today just, said, hearts go out. We don't know. And, that type of situation is still a lot of unknown.
Yeah, he wouldn't give a timetable. I mean, everybody kind of talked about it yesterday on social media. David Andrews missed an entire season. Mike Reese was, I believe, on Toucher and Hardy this morning and said he wouldn't be surprised if it's a year as well. So, you can't put a timetable on that type of injury or medical situation, I guess. So, you hope for the best, but I'd be surprised if we see him this year now.
Yeah, that's just devastating. You mentioned earlier, Tyler, you gave him that contract. He just turned 25 yesterday. He had his 25th birthday. I mean, he's entering the prime of his career. He was dominant at times last year, one of the 3 best interior linemen in the league. And for this to happen, and again, it's also a blow for the team, right? Because he is your best defensive player. You're counting on him. One thing you could say about Belichick, whether you like the way he drafted in recent years or not, they're pretty well set up at some key positions with good young players. Gonzalez could end up being one of the best corners in the league. Barmore is one of the best interior defensive linemen in the league. They've got guys at all 3 levels of that defense that could be amongst the best at their positions in the league. It's just sad to see where things are with him right now, but we do want to wish Christian the best of luck. We wish him nothing but the best. And take your time with this, man. Your health, your life is way more important than the game of football. Follow doctor's orders and do what you need to do to get back on the field. And I know, and I'm sure that both the organization and the medical staff, they're not going to rush this. The blood clots are nothing to play with, so they'll handle it the right way. You are watching / listening to the New England Football Show presented by Mortgage Rate. I'm your host, John Sirnides. As always, I'm joined by Kevin Stone. Adam Kirchin is on assignment tonight. We are joined by Tyler Sullivan from CBS Sports. We were not able to come your way last week because of technical issues, but we are back and running. We are full bore into football season here, ladies and gentlemen. So, gentlemen, I have to ask, and actually before I do that, I do want to remind you that if you're in the market to purchase your first home or sell your current home and purchase your next home, give our good friend Herb Devine a call, 781-254-2846. You can also shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. With over 27 years of experience, he is the loan officer you need to get you in the right program to purchase your next home. He and his team are available anytime, including nights and weekends. So, before we wrap up the Patriots talk here, and before we wrap up our time with you, Tyler, I do want to ask you guys, what are you looking forward to here the rest of this week ahead of next week's preseason opener at home against the Carolina Panthers?
Yeah, I think to me, the thing that I'm looking forward to is the offensive line. Obviously, they've kind of, I don't know, Kevin, do we say that they've settled on something? Are they on the scent of something with Caden Wallace at left tackle? He's been there for the past few days, and obviously noteworthy that he's there during, the Jacoby Brissett reps, if you want to call those first team reps, whatever you want to call them, on the first day of pads. That's pretty exciting because Javon Baker has really kind of been showing out the last couple of days. Jalen Polk's had his moments. It's been up and down for Drake May. He didn't have a good practice today, in my estimation, but he's a number 3 overall pick, super talented. If you're telling me that you can draft a quarterback at number 3, you come away with 2 young, promising receivers, and there is your young tackle on track to start at left tackle. All right, Elliot Wolf, you're starting to cook a little bit. And again, early, we all know that. But as these more physical practices go on, I want to see Caden Wallace and see if he continues to stick at left tackle.
Yeah, I mean, verbatim, it's what we talked about this morning. For me, it's Okorafor up front in terms of, looking at that group. David Andrews also didn't practice today. So I'm already starting to get worried about, how much have we talked about continuity over the last 4 or 5 years? Just having that one group of guys, we already haven't seen it. We don't know what the group is yet. So that's a little worrisome. You're right about May. Brissett had his best day of camp, I thought, though, overall. He had a couple of throws to Tyquan Thornton in particular that we both looked at each other, said, holy crap, where's that been? But I'm also, I guess, sort of in a general sense, I want to see how Mayo handles the preseason. Again, they have a game a week from Thursday. Like, how much do you play some guys? How much do you play the rookies? And he talked about this, I think it was last week. He was still kind of debating on how they want to handle things. So given how today went, I want to see how the rest of the week goes. But as far as the game next week, just sort of in general, what does his operation look like overall? And the communication with the coordinators and just sort of all encompassing. I want to see how they approach a game day next week.
And I'll give you this one too. The wide receivers. I kind of want to know how this shakes out. I know we're talking a lot about the offensive tackles, and rightfully so. It's a huge piece to this offense, and I think a huge piece to possibly when we see Drake May. But this wide receiver group is, the youngsters are flashing a little bit. Javon Baker had a couple of nice catches. We just talked about Tyquan Thornton. Jalen Polk's had a good summer so far. The guys that haven't really been popping are the veterans. Like Juju Smith-Schuster has been an essential non-factor. I don't think he's making the team, if we're being totally honest. And that's, it's a lot of money that they might have to eat. I believe it's like $7 million or something like that they might have to eat. Even KJ Osborne hasn't been, lighting the world on fire. Not that we expected him to. He's a number 3 wide receiver in Minnesota coming here. The hope most you expect is possibly a number 2. But I kind of want to see how this other group of wide receivers shakes out, because I think that Baker, Pop Douglas, and Polk are the 3 locks, and you could throw Bourne in there if you want, if he's fully healthy. But other than that, all these other guys are still duking it out here, and I'm kind of waiting to see someone really start to emerge other than those other guys.
Yeah, and just to add to that, right now, and again, Tyler, back me up, I think Polk is wide receiver 1 right now. He's been their best player of camp, maybe out of anybody. He's been the most consistent. Baker has come on the last 2 days. You can tell he has that wide receiver swagger to him whenever he's on the field. Although Mayo pointed something out today, Baker had a very long catch yesterday, threw the ball in the air, but he wasn't tagged down yet. Just sort of those little rookie mistakes that Mayo was saying, guys still have to learn. And then also the tight ends. Austin Hooper has been a very nice surprise. He's been very consistent, very reliable. He's caught everything. So you might have something there in the red zone too. But I do think Polk has been their best receiver by far.
Yeah, I totally agree.
What if Sullivan said he wouldn't back you up? What would you do then, Stone? What if he said,
actually,
I
do not back
Kevin,
up.
I'm not backing you up. How about
Probably
that?
just keep talking out of my ass like usual.
Right. I figured as much. Well, I think before we do let you go, Tyler, I do want to come back to one thing, and that's Drake May. and I want to get your thoughts on where he's at right now from what you guys have seen. This time of year with quarterback play can be very frustrating with me because I think a lot of people sit there, they count the reps, they share the reps. This is how many times they threw the ball. This is how many they completed. This is what they did in Skelly. This is what they did in team. I don't get caught up in that just because I don't care about that. That means nothing this time of year. Talk to me when it means something when the games start and they're played and they count. But it's interesting because a lot of people have started now to compare where May is at this stage of his first camp with the Patriots and where Mac Jones was 3 years ago at this stage in his first camp with the Patriots. And many people are saying, well, he was further along. And there's probably some truth to that. But I do think there's a lot of factors that go into that. But what have you seen from May? And have you seen anything to concern you? Are you concerned with his performance thus far? Because based on what's been coming out of there for the past week, it seems pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, he's a rookie. You're going through the rookie lumps. It's not going to show up and be Peyton Manning and, right out of the gate. Like, it's just not going to happen. Even, I'm sure Caleb Williams, I haven't been checking too deeply into Chicago, but, like, I'm sure that isn't going, perfect. I'm sure there's other situations. But, and even going to the Mac Jones situation as well, like, we talked about him when he was at Alabama. His quote-unquote superpower was his ability to process in his mind. So that kind of makes sense that he was able to kind of pick things up quickly in work in that regard. May, he's got raw ability. I mean, we've seen the deep ball in full display in certain flashes throughout camp, and you can kind of tell he's, has a couple of sidearm throws. He's got skill. There's no doubt about that. The things that concern me a little bit are just kind of fully grasping the offense. I've seen a couple of times now, specifically when May's in during his reps, they're rehuddling. There's kind of conversations going on. They're clearly trying to get the cadence down. They're clearly trying to get the play call out in the procedural situation that he's in. It just feels a little clunky to me at times, and sometimes throws the rep into a halt naturally because they have to rehuddle and they're kind of starting over. But outside of that, I think the big question, or, not a question, but it's something that is catching my eye, and I noticed it today. I was specifically looking for it because it was in full pads. During non-padded practices, he was very quick to start running and just scramble out and go and run. He was doing that a little bit today as well, and I'm getting a little concerned about his internal clock. Again, it's July, it's early, but if this offensive line isn't ready, that's kind of where I get a little concerned for May, because he's already showing signs of speeding up that internal clock. Yes, there are times to run. There are times to utilize his athleticism. But there was one today where he just didn't read a blitz, immediately rolled to his right and threw the ball away. If he just calmed down a little bit, I think it was Javon Baker that he had open over the middle. He could have made an easy completion. You just kind of got sped up a little bit because you saw that pass rush coming. That internal clock to me is something that I'm going to be watching.
Yeah, Tal, you nailed it. And although it's funny because I looked at you a few times, when he decides to run, he's very decisive. Like, he goes and he goes.
And he's athletic. It works. Like,
yeah.
he's athletic. So he can take advantage of that. Yeah. I just am concerned that it's almost a crutch in certain instances.
No, I agree. And I wrote this today. I put it as, I termed it antsy. He seems antsy back there. Like, he wants to make the play, but he wants it to happen right away. So there's definitely a speed component there, a speed up component there. Look, yeah, he has the arm, but I think it's very clear Jacoby is the more calm, just a steady presence.
The veteran.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the huddle. It happened with Jacoby a few times their first few days as well. So I think that's just maybe, and John, you can speak to this, maybe just getting used to the new offense. But no, I mean, I was of the mind that he could start. I don't think there's any shot in hell now, unless he, flips the script in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But yeah, the talent is there. It's obvious. He's a big kid. That's obvious. The arm is there. But you're right. It's everything is sped up for him right now. And it's very, very apparent when you watch him consistently.
Yeah, and look, this is why I've said all along he can't play right away. I don't care how good he looks in camp. He's going to need some time to sit and watch how an NFL offensive operation works and learn from a veteran and listen to the coaches and develop study habits and develop work habits and when he shows up and when he leaves, he needs to learn to do all those things. He was never, in my opinion, of all those quarterbacks, Chicago doesn't have a choice. They had to play Williams right away. Okay, to a certain extent, the Commanders don't have a choice. They have to play Jaden Daniels right away. The Patriots are in a position where they recognize that Drake May could end up being the best quarterback in this group. His talent is on par with those guys, if not superior. But unlike those guys, he's not ready to play right away. And I think you're seeing it now. And people get stuck on his footwork and what's his footwork like and all this other stuff. That it doesn't matter what his footwork likes. It looks like. Who cares? At this point, it's not about his footwork. At this point, it's about him learning how to play the position at the NFL level. And right now, he is not in a position through 5 practices where he could do it at a high level. And so you'd be doing this young man a disservice if you push him along to play him. And this is where I think coaches get trapped in the NFL. Let's say he goes out and he plays really well in these 3 preseason games. The temptation is going to be there at the end of August to name him your starter. But you have to believe that he can play in a regular season game against the other team's starting defense. If he does enough the rest of this summer to get you to believe that he can do that, great, then play him. But to your point, Kevin, the chances of him making up that kind of ground, it's probably not going to happen. So even if he plays well, I still think you're better off at least starting Brissett, riding with him and see how it goes. And then you kind of go from there. But look, I knew it was only a matter of time before he was going to be compared to Mac Jones. He's a much better prospect than Mac Jones was when he came out of Alabama. Jones went 15th for a reason. Anybody that watched Mac Jones play at Alabama knew that in order for him to have any chance of succeeding with the Patriots, it was going to be all about the supporting cast. It wasn't there. It wasn't good enough. The coaching wasn't good enough, and the kid failed. This kid has a lot more talent than Mac Jones. They know that they failed Mac Jones as an organization. They can't fail this kid. They're going to do it right. They're going to take their time. There's going to be growing pains. It's going to look ugly at times in practice. That's okay. Let's not forget. And I know that some members of the media don't want to hear this, and the fans don't want to hear this, but they're installing a new offense. It matters. It takes time for them to apply the verbiage that they're learning and the terminology that they're learning in the classroom, the line calls, the checks, all of this stuff, the audibles, all of this stuff is going to take time. It's a brand new system, brand new language. Again, I know I did this a couple of years ago and it kind of blew up in my face where I talked about, I preached patience, but I really think we need to preach patience right now. Let's not rush to judgment after 5 practices. Let's pump the brakes and take a deep breath. Tyler, I want to say thank you for taking the time, man. Really, really appreciate it. And let's do this again before the start of the regular season.
Yeah, no problem, guys. Thanks for having me. I'll see you guys tomorrow at training camp.
Thanks,
All right,
Tyler.
sounds good. That is Tyler Sullivan from CBS Sports. Thanks again, Tyler. Appreciate it, man. All right, we are going to shift gears here now, and Kevin and I are going to talk some college football here for the last few minutes of the show. Of course, training camps kick off in earnest this weekend. Boston College kicks off training camp on Saturday, the first fall camp under Bill O'Brien. And Kevin, look, the Eagles have had a strong spring, strong summer in recruiting, but now the focus is shifting to the regular season and the start of fall camp. Of course, you're going to be there on Saturday. I will be at Gillette Stadium with the Patriots. Wish me luck. I'll be in recovery mode after night 1 of Metallica. If I go as hard as I usually do, this will be my 12th Metallica concert. I'm going to be hurting. But anyway, enough about me and Metallica. What are you shaking your head for? Greatest band of all time. Anyhow, that's my opinion. Thoughts on Saturday in Boston College? What are you looking forward to? Obviously, we got a pretty good idea of what this program and what this offense is going to look like in the spring. But what are some thoughts on what we can expect to see out of Bill O'Brien's football team in fall camp?
The honeymoon period is over, right? I mean, and Bill O'Brien even acknowledged that on ACC kickoff, which was for them last Wednesday, Thursday. Can't remember, but he point blank said, look, it's over now. It's go time. So um, I'm hoping to see them hit the ground running offensively. When they left spring ball, it was very clear that they were talented outside. Receivers are good, running backs are good. Offensive line, yes, you lose Christian Mahogany and Kyle Hergel. You still have some really good players at a back, man.
Oh yeah,
You still have Logan Taylor. You
you
still
still
have
have Logan Taylor. You still have Drew Kendall.
That's the thing. So that group,
Ozzie Trapio.
that group should be maybe not as good as last year, but a top. Is it fair to say 20 unit, maybe rushing the ball in the country again? I don't think that's far fetched at all. So offensive line, I expect to be good again. I think Trayshawn Ward helps a ton with the running backs. It just takes a lot off Kyle Robichaux's plate first and foremost. I think Alex Broom might be out for the year. He got banged up during camp. We never got sort of a full confirmation about his status, but I still think they're okay.
That's a loss because he had some strong moments last year.
Huge, but it's an opportunity for local guy Datrell Jones to step up, who had a huge camp as well. And then
Day has earned that opportunity at a strong spring game as well.
100%. So, and then look, it's all about Tommy Castellanos. Does he take the next step? Is he really an elite quarterback? I found it interesting during his time on ACC Network. He talked a lot about being just kind of thrown into the fire last year. And then he was asked why he didn't leave when Hafley left. And he said, look, I won the starting job. I won over the locker room, and I don't want to move again. And you kind of forget, A, these are college kids, but B, how much goes into winning a starting job, especially at a Power 5 school. So he seems much more relaxed and prepared heading into the season. I think that's huge. Again, he hadn't even really thrown a football heading into camp last year. All of his high school tape was him running the ball. So I think I personally think he takes that next step really as an overall sort of quarterback. Yes, he's a dual threat guy, but and we've talked about this ad nauseum. If he can become a better decision maker and a more accurate thrower, well, then they're cooking with gas now. And that offense, that receiving group is very good. You have Bradley, you have Bond, you have Skeet, you have McGowan now. Like, they're deep really all over the offense. It's just a matter of can TC put it all together and make it work. Defensively, I'm still skeptical about linebacker. You have Cam Arnold still. You don't know what you're going to get with Bryce Steele. He was there, but he's coming back from some major health issues. You can't put too much pressure on him yet. Secondary, Amari Jackson should be your number one. You have Jalen Cheek. You have a bunch of guys that are unproven, and then that front seven or the front line really, I think could be as good as anybody in the ACC as long as they're healthy. Ezaraku, Okpala, George Rooks, and I'm missing Cam
That
Horsley.
pass rush is going to be very good.
It should be. That's the thing.
Okpala and Ezaraku both had really good springs.
And Okpala's spring, when I tell you he was unblockable, he couldn't be stopped. He was unstoppable at pretty much every practice. So, long story short, does it sound like I'm high on them again? Sure. I don't see why I shouldn't be, though. Now, the schedule's tough.
Schedule's much tougher than any schedule we saw in the Hafley era. I think that I'm high on them too, Kevin, but I do think that the schedule is going to be the difference.
Yep. And we'll know early. 3 of those first 4, it's Michigan State, Missouri, and Florida State. So, and 2 of those are on the road, including Labor Day night. So we're going to know very, very early about this team. But there's so much talent on this team that I don't ever remember seeing all, especially on offense, that I haven't seen in a long time watching BC, even from afar before covering the team. So I think they're going to be very good, but camp is going to be important. That goes without saying. But to hit the ground running offensively, defense I think is going to be fine, especially with Tim Lewis running the show now. But I'm hoping communication-wise, they're on the same page right away, and we see it early on offense. You were with me in a few practices. They were up and down. It wasn't consistent enough. If they can become a consistent offense, and again, that goes back to Tommy, I think the sky's the limit for them. I really do.
Yeah. I think a lot of their success, particularly on offense, is going to hinge on Castellanos and how well he picks up this offense and how well he plays within the offense. This is going to be more of a passing offense than what they did with him last year. And I think this I mean, this is a pro-style NFL offense. They ran pro-style NFL concepts last year as well. Let's not forget. But I do think that this will be more of a pass-first offense, and he's going to need to prove that he can throw the football, but he's also going to need to prove, to your point, that he's a good decision maker with it, because that's the drawback. We know what kind of an athlete he is. We know what he is as a runner. We know how good the offensive line and the running game are going to be. They're going to need him to be effective throwing the football because, as you said, they've got the pieces on the perimeter. They're going to be able to run the football inside the tackles. Can they attack all three levels in the passing game? Can they run the football effectively and take those shots over the top and play action? That's where we're going to need to see improvement from Castellanos. If we do, and he plays within the confines of this system, it's not out of the question that he could find himself come December being in the Heisman conversation in some capacity. I wouldn't call him a Heisman candidate now, but I think if he plays within this system and he's coached up by O'Brien and this offensive staff, BC could end up having a pretty good year, and he could be in that Heisman conversation come the end of the season.
The other interesting thing O'Brien talked about the other day, and this sort of fits to your point, he doesn't want to take away that running ability. So Bill O'Brien's also going to need to balance, and we know, God knows, he hates turnovers more than anything. But he also knows that
he's a Belichick disciple.
Right. But just looking at the back,
taking care of the football and accuracy are paramount.
Right. And TC said, Bill O'Brien has told him the ball is the future of the program, which has sort of been ingrained into his head. But I'm curious to see if we do start seeing those turnovers again, how short is that leash? Because we saw Grayson James in camp. That kid's got an arm, and he can run this offense just as well as Tommy can, if not maybe a little better. And you said this early on, just because he's a better fit, with that style of play that he has. So Tommy knows that he'll be breathing down his neck. But I am curious.
And O'Brien talked about that after the spring game. That not only did O'Brien talk about it, Castellanos knows it's going to be a competition. He knows he's not a lock to be the starter.
No, but again, knowing Bill O'Brien lately, at least the last 2 years that we've covered him, how patient is he going to be if those turnovers start coming? Because you do have the athleticism that, Grayson James can maneuver the pocket. He can't take off like Tommy can, though. So that's going to be a good balance to watch, too.
And UConn, of course, is going to be holding their media day tomorrow. They'll be kicking off camp at the end of this week as well. Big year for Jim Morris Huskies, coming off a disappointing 3-9 campaign after a 6-6 regular season and a bowl appearance 2 years ago. A lot of changes this offseason, both in terms of personnel and coaching. Nick Charlton, good friend of ours, he has left the program. He has since moved on to coach in the NFL with the Cleveland Browns. He will be an offensive assistant there, working on the run game side of things for the Browns. Enter Gordy Samus, who is the offensive line coach and was a run game coordinator. He is now going to be the offensive coordinator. He'll be the primary play caller. Coach Brock comes into the program. He'll be coaching the defense. Look, Mora made some changes on his staff. There was a lot of turnover on the roster. Either way you slice it, some familiar faces have left the program, most notably Taquan Roberson, who transferred out, which now opens up the door for Joe Fagnano to potentially be the starting quarterback, assuming he wins the job in camp. There are still some other young quarterbacks, Wachusett's own Tucker McDonald, that are in the program that the staff likes, and incoming freshman Cole Welliver from Texas. He was impressive as well in the spring. But make no mistake about it, Kevin, this is a big season for Jim Morris Huskies. They need to turn things around and get back to a place where they can be bowl eligible. The schedule is tough at the beginning. They open on August 31st at Maryland. They play Maryland, they play Duke, they play Wake. The schedule, it has its tough spots, but the schedule also has some spots where they could potentially get on a run. They play 8 home games. They're in a pretty good situation here to turn this thing around and get back into bowl contention as an independent.
Yeah, that spot in the schedule where I think it's 6 straight at home, you have to go at least 4-2. I don't even know the opponents. I don't care. You have to go 4-2 if you have 6 straight home games, and if you're going to be a bowl eligible team. It's funny. UConn alum Andrew Callahan from the Boston Herald, we were talking yesterday, and I said, look, I don't know if it's necessarily bowl or bust, but it's pretty close for them, I think. We talked a lot last year. It was an opposite season. They had that incredible run to a bowl game Moore's first year, and then everything just went south last year. You can't have another, we talk about peaks and valleys. You can't have another valley if you're Jim Mora. That fan base won't stand for it, and I'm not sure how much, I guess, equity you'll have in the locker room if you have another down year like you did last year. Don't forget, they had kids jumping ship last year during the year. Like it was not pretty at times for UConn, not only on the field, but off of it. So just in general, for that culture to kind of come back like it was the first year under Mora, you need to have a good year, and they cannot blow home games this year. I think that home field advantage for them is, and this goes without saying for a lot of teams, but winning at the Rent this year is paramount for that team.
Yeah, where I disagree with you though is I think that this is, and I'm not making excuses for Mora, but we do need to be honest with ourselves here when we look at UConn. The facilities are there, the support is there to a degree. I think that there's still a level of frustration there on Mora's part in regards to total support and investment in the program. Look, they're in a tough spot. UMass got into a conference. They're going to play predominantly a MAC schedule this year, and we're going to talk about them in a minute. And then they're going to be full-time in the MAC in 2025. They got into a conference. The pressure is now on UConn to get into a conference. They need to get into a conference. And I know we keep beating this dead horse, but life as an independent is hard. And it's even harder now because you got the schools that are left over from the old Pac-12 that are trying to find their way now. And they may end up forming this new Super Mountain West Conference. Who knows? Life is hard as an independent. We have said this for a long time. UConn cannot continue to function as an independent. They need to get into a conference. Now, I will say this. They had a hell of an offseason in recruiting. They did a terrific job in recruiting. They did a terrific job in the portal. That this is on paper, this might be the most talented team that Mora has had in his 3 years at UConn. I do agree with you, though. They need a turnaround season. They need to end up bowl eligible because if you win 3 or 4 games again, it gets really hard at UConn really fast for the football program if they're not winning. It's a basketball school. They've won back-to-back men's basketball titles. It will always be a basketball school. Could you change the narrative a little bit? Sure. But I think at the end of the day, if you're Jim Mora, you need a turnaround season. You need the level of excitement to be there for the program. They've got a strong NIL now, a competitive NIL that allows them to be in the hunt for certain kids. And I think, again, the schedule is set up, even though you're going to have some bumps in the road, the schedule is set up with the amount of home games that they're going to have that, again, there's no reason for them not to be bowl eligible. Our Tony Catalina is going to be there tomorrow for UConn Media Day. And that brings us to UMass. Of course, they kick things off on Friday with their Media Day. They kick off camp this weekend. Our Ryan Barry is tentatively scheduled to be there on Friday. Look, a lot of similarities between UMass and UConn when we talk about trajectory of the program. At the end of the day, in my opinion, UMass needs to take meaningful steps this year, Kevin. It's not about 3 wins anymore. They need to be in bowl contention. They need to win at least 5 games and finish 5-7, or they need to win 6 and get a bowl bid. I just think we're at a place now where the gloss is worn off the baseball card with Don Brown. The expectations are high. It's time that this program meets those expectations. I think Tyson Fulmershon coming back as a starting quarterback is huge if he stays healthy, which has been an issue. But if he stays healthy, he's dynamic. He's a dual threat playmaker. You got Anthony Simpson on the outside, arguably a top 50 receiver in the country, a guy that should get drafted in next year's draft. I think that this team has pieces. The running game is going to be questionable. Obviously, replacing Lynch Adams is going to be hard, but that offensive line brings back some experience. The defense also brings back some experience. The secondary is in flux, but there's enough talent there with this UMass football team that they have to take that next step here in year 3 for Don Brown.
Yeah, I mean, if Bill O'Brien's honeymoon phase is over, what is Don Brown's? Like, he's on his 3rd wedding at this point for UMass. Like, they have to make a bowl game. I don't even know if eligibility.
I don't think 5 wins is good enough for them.
That's what I'm saying.
Be honest with you.
No, I don't either. And will they fire Don Brown?
No,
probably not. No, but
it won't.
He'll be on a
No,
hot seat.
because let's be honest here. You could fire Don Brown, but Don Brown's as good as you're going to get there at this point. I don't think that that's at stake.
Agreed. However, the chatter will absolutely pick up. We know that fan base as well as anybody. Results need to happen at some point. And to their credit, they've been patient with Don Brown. Like last year, I don't remember the UMass fan base really being in an uproar for how bad the record was. So I think the patience is going to wear off this year. But you mentioned Tyson Fomachon, I still can't pronounce it right. Just honestly, and it might sound dumb, but playing with him in the NCAA game, there's talent on that offense. But that is a talented offense if they put the pieces together. You mentioned Simpson on the outside, speedy receiver who can beat guys and go catch the ball, whether it's a 50-50 ball or over the middle. And he's just, in terms of a quarterback, he's a big dude. Like, he's hard to bring down. He can run, and he's got a good arm.
And you're drawing all of these conclusions from playing the video game.
Well, and from our camp visits.
Amazing. Amazing. I mean, these people think that we're quasi-experts, that we know what we're talking about, and we're basing our opinions on a video game. What the hell is going on here?
Those that have the game will know what I'm saying. But no, really, he was a difference between, his injury last year. We saw what they did in that opener.
Yeah.
They put up, 45, I think, in the season opener last year.
Well, it made a big difference. And when he got hurt, I thought Carlos Davis did a nice job keeping them competitive. Brady Olson also played. They've reimagined their quarterback room.
Yep.
But Fomachon's still going to be the guy. Let's not forget, you also have a new offensive coordinator in Shane Montgomery. Of course, he comes in, longtime MAC coordinator. He replaces Steve Kasula, who returned to Michigan as the tight ends coach under Sharon Moore. So that's another big storyline here to watch for this UMass team. How's Shane Montgomery going to change things? I would think, knowing some of the way he likes to play in the past, I think Fomachon's going to be the centerpiece of the offense. I think he's going to be a dual threat guy. They're going to use him in a variety of ways. But Montgomery likes running the football. They want to be physical. They want to run the football. They want a power running game. They've got a collection of backs there, but they don't have the guy. And I think that's going to be the difference for them right now.
And the other thing we haven't even talked about, we talked about it a lot last year. Don Brown's defense was not a Don Brown defense last year, especially on third down. I feel like last year we talked a lot about them not being able to tackle and not being able to get off the field. Dr. Blitz, you can bring all the pressure you want, but if you're not getting off the field on third down and giving that offense a chance to not have to come back from 14-21 down in the first or second quarter, it's a big difference. So I think that defense needs to be better this year too. And I think they will be, but again, if results aren't there this year, the chatter is going to start. There's no way around it.
Now, when you say the chatter is going to start, though, I mean, do you really believe that if this team, let's say, went, 4-8, do you really believe that this, and it's a passionate fan base, and I'm not poo-pooing that, but how loud are they going to be? Are they going to be loud enough that Ryan Bamford's going to have a decision to make? I find that hard to believe. I don't see that.
No, so I'd say going into next year, he'll be on the hot seat. I'm not saying he'll be removed, but that would be what, year 5? This is year 4, I believe.
No,
or year 3.
Year 3.
So year 4, going into year 4, if you're a 3 or 4 win team again this year, and you've only seen a 2-game improvement or 3-game improvement in 3 years, I think hot seat. I'm not saying they'd move on from him this offseason, but I think heading into next year, I think that hot seat is very, very real.
Yeah, and I think, getting back to running back real quick, Jalen John, Cookie Desidario are 2 guys to keep an eye on. But again, it's going to be a collective effort there. I don't think he's going to be on the hot seat. I really don't. I think that they're going to give him at least 5 years.
I was going to say, what's he going to take?
Because the other thing you've got to keep in mind is they're going into the MAC in 2025. You're not going to make a coaching change going into a conference, and you're certainly not going to make a coaching change 1 year into being in a conference. I don't see that scenario playing out, and we need to be realistic here. If it's not Don Brown, who is it? I'm not sure you get a higher profile candidate than Don Brown currently in the game. Okay, I mean, you've had Mark Whipple twice in the past, and Whip's resume and his success speaks for itself. He won a national championship there in 1998. Brown, of course, was his defensive coordinator. But I think at the end of the day, you're not going to get better than Don Brown. So you just got to sit back and no offense to UMass, you're going into the MAC. There needs to be more of an investment in facilities here. Enough with the bubble. Enough with McGuirk looking like a Texas high school football stadium. We need an investment. The state needs to make an investment. They've made some investment with the Performance Center, but you need to make even more of an investment in terms of McGuirk, and you need to get an actual indoor facility there, not the bubble. I mean, let's face it, a kid could be playing around outside the bubble and stick something in it and deflate the damn thing while people are in it.
No,
I know I sound like Trump there, but
there's high schools around here that are far nicer.
I mean, you need to upgrade the facility. So we could sit here and speculate as to what Don Brown's potential future could be. That's a stupid conversation, in my opinion. Don Brown should coach at UMass until he doesn't want to coach anymore. End of story. He should be there as long as he wants. And
well, I agree. To your point, I wasn't even thinking about the MAC. You can't make that move heading into the conference.
No.
So, but I will say, so if year one in the MAC doesn't go well, is he then on the hot seat?
He might be, but again, I mean, I think you have to objectively look at this. You have to look at where you are as a program. You have to look at what investment have you made in your football program. We can sit here and talk about Don Brown all we want, but the fact is he's doing it the way a lot of other coaches are doing it now, through the portal. He is trying to win. He's bringing in experienced kids. Yes, this past offseason, they did focus more on high school players in recruiting and starting to develop a foundation. But at the end of the day, he's trying to win the same way everybody else is. And he's trying to sell a program, which, let's face it, other than playing for him and an opportunity, I mean, there are certain programs that UMass offers that the degree has international value. But let's be honest here. I mean, there's not much more that UMass is. You're not beating out other schools for kids. You're beating them out because of Don Brown, because of his staff, because of what they could do for you to help you get to the NFL. And I think that's their number one selling point. There's, what else are they going to sell in Amherst? Are they going to sell the place me, you, and Kirkshin go to get, rice bowls? I mean, what are they going to sell? It's no offense to UMass. I love UMass. I love the school. I love the fan base, but it's not the easiest sell in football and even in basketball. Frank Martin is the sell, but the reality is you need more there. And I think that they've got to beef up the facilities. That's going to go a long way in helping them in recruiting. But this is a big year nonetheless, and I do think they need to win 2 or 3 more games and at least be on the doorstep of possibly being bowl eligible, because I think that they should be at that point, A, and B, the fan base deserves that. All right, Stone, great job as always. We'll see you up at Gillette tomorrow.
Absolutely.
All right, more hijinks and drama at Patriots training camp. I haven't used the word hijinks in a while. I wanted to throw that in there. But that'll do it for this week's episode. I do want to, again, thank Tyler Sullivan for joining us earlier, filling in for Adam Kirchin, who's on assignment. I don't know where he is. He's down the Cape somewhere or something. He's at a lighthouse. I don't know what he's doing. But hopefully Adam's back with us next week. And we'll talk some more Patriots for you, of course, ahead of the August 8th preseason opener against Carolina. We'll get into some college football with camps having opened. We'll talk about early impressions, and we'll get into some high school football for you as well. That'll be next week. For Kevin Stone, I'm John Serenitas. Till then, peace.